I'm Mindy Anderson. My partner, Ike Allen, and I are teachers, mentors, and the co-owners of Avaya University. Avaya is the creator of over 1,000 books, films, courses, teachings, and other supportive resources. Thank you, as always, for joining us. Our fellow teacher, Ken Page, is back with us today to talk about 3 life-changing tools to break free from trauma. Ken is a renowned psychotherapist, author, podcast host, and a leading voice of hope and wisdom for everyone seeking to find and cultivate healthy, lasting love. He has been featured in the Oprah Magazine, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, Cosmopolitan, The Advocate, and many, many more. Ken is passionate about helping people understand the search for love as one of the greatest spiritual adventures in life. And he celebrates the inclusion of the LGBTQ community into the banquet of wiser relationship advice. Welcome back to Avaya, Ken.
I am so glad to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, so glad to have you back. I'm so glad that we could do this again together, and
Me too.
really enjoyed our first conversation around emotional abuse, and now we get to talk trauma. So I know that this is something that you have had decades of work with, trauma. So what would you say are the most important insights you have gained in all those years of working with trauma?
I think that's a great question, and it's it's a subject that is very, very close to my heart because there are what they call large T traumas and small
Mhm.
T traumas, and large T traumas are the very, very intense ones, which many of us have experienced. And then there are the small T traumas, which are still trauma and affect us deeply. And they may not be able to have such a kind of name of like that something really apocalyptic happened to you, but they affect you deeply. And until we have a language to understand what trauma is and how it works inside of us, we're going to be using our heads and our thinking to figure things out. But trauma needs something different. It needs a number of different things, but it needs a different approach than just a cognitive approach. So um, I think what I have learned in the deepest way is the way we need to hold trauma and the difference that that makes. So I guess I'll just say, I mean, I have so much to say about this, but I'll just share some indicators of trauma so that you know that you are dealing with trauma experiences, with PTSD, with the experience of living trauma in the moment, of being triggered from past traumas. One of the signs is that your thinking doesn't help you at all. You're in an experience that reverberates so deeply that you just react to it in kind of very kind of young or defensive ways. You don't have like a great place where you could just go to your good, healthy adult thinking. Um, what happens with trauma is that part of us freezes and we experience a lot of pain and we want to do whatever we can to get out of that pain or that numbness or that disconnection from self, and we use a lot of methods to do it that don't tend to work. And we, as a community of practitioners and healers, have learned a ton about trauma and what works, what helps, and what doesn't help. And so I'm just going to be talking a little bit about kind of research backed insights and then some heartfelt insights that make a huge difference as well. And I'm going to join those together and just kind of share the best information that I can with this community.
Mm.
So I guess I'll just say one research-based piece that I think is really important. Originally, early on, when people started defining trauma, the belief in the scientific community was that trauma could not be addressed and could not be fixed. It just couldn't. There was not a solution to PTSD, to the experience of serious trauma and its repercussions. And then people started doing serious research on that, and they discovered that there was actually something that could make a difference in breaking through PTSD patterns, and that was breathing exercises. So that was a really, really interesting breakthrough. And what they discovered was that when you were doing the breathing exercises, the symptoms of trauma would diminish, But when you were done doing the breathing exercises, that did not last or generalize. There's been so much research since then, and there are many wonderful tools. And I just want to mention three particular tools that are super powerful and wonderful, and which I use and have used and have also referred people to, because I'm not trained in all of them. One is EMDR,
Mm.
which stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. And that's the most highly researched method of dealing with post-traumatic stress disorder. And I'm going to get away from the research in a minute, but I just want to say these things because I think they're really important. And PET scans have been done of people's brains after doing EMDR practice, and their brains actually change. And EMDR is a method that's profoundly powerful for healing really deep, deep trauma. Um, there are a number of kind of variations of it, but one that is interesting and beautiful and powerful was created by David Grand, and it's called brain spotting.
Mhm.
That's a kind of newer generation, which is both gentler and deepens your sense of self-soothing at the same time as you kind of go through the EMDR process, because EMDR is pretty intense. I'm a trained practitioner of it, and I love EMDR, but it can be very, very intense, and there are side effects. Um, I'm just going to say what those side effects are, because I think for anybody who goes into EMDR treatment, these side effects are often not mentioned. And those are that addiction can be intensified. It's like having a circuit and you run too much power through it and it's got to go somewhere.
Mm.
So if you're not working with a practitioner who has evaluated you for addiction before doing EMDR, that's a problem. That's a really important thing. And another thing is that dissociative symptoms are also intensified often. So if you have dissociative disorder, which many people who have experienced deep trauma do have, you need to work with a practitioner who is highly skilled at that, because otherwise the results could be very problematic.
Mm.
Um, there's another technique called tapping, or emotional freedom technique. There's also a good amount of research on that. There are less side effects. It's a very different experience, but you can actually do it to yourself. And it's something that I do every day for dealing with the traumas and the small t traumas that I have. It's a beautiful technique. I won't be able to go into it here, but you can find tons of literature. Dawson Church is a brilliant researcher who's done a lot of work on the science of it. Nick Ortner and Jessica Ortner and the tapping solution also, have really popularized it and have beautiful, beautiful work available. So what I want to say is, first, there are treatments for dealing with trauma, and it's really important that we know that, because if we don't know how to address trauma, we won't be able to get through it. It's just like addiction. There are certain approaches that you need to know about if you're going to really help with it, because just talking is not going to work.
So thank you, Ken, for talking about those three different tools that you've had experience with. What in your own professional opinion and personal opinion has been, I guess, your favorite, or the one that's worked the best for you guys?
Well, I think they're all powerful. I think it depends on which, I think that EMDR proper is a very, very powerful tool. It's very deep, it's very intense, it demands a lot of time. I think everybody should know about tapping. For the small t traumas. For the large t traumas, you would need to, work with a practitioner, I believe, because it's very powerful. Large t traumas are really big, big, big deals.
Mhm.
I think everybody who is interested in the subject of trauma and how it affects us should use tapping. I have some other tools that I'm going to talk about too, that are just tools that I've worked with and that I've developed that I don't have any research basis on, but a lot of experience with these things, helping people in very powerful ways. So
Great.
I'm excited to share that too. I wanted to start with kind of the research, because I think that's always a good place to start.
Mhm.
But I think that what happens with trauma is that the pain is so big that our system shuts down. And so for example, like a way to think about this is you hit your funny bone on the table. And at the moment you hit your funny bone and you're feeling all these like horrible, strange sensations that just, for a few moments take you over, at that moment, if somebody said to you something like, "Oh, why don't you see if you could find a color that captures the quality of this pain?" Or, "Why don't you just think yourself out of this?" You wouldn't even be able to talk to them because you would be in trauma. And what happens in trauma is that our system freezes and shuts down because it doesn't have the resources. So there's a shutdown, and we go into whatever that kind of shutdown state is that we go into. What I believe can really help in powerful ways is naming when we're experiencing trauma as the first step. For example, you're in a group of people, you're at a party, and you say something, you're in a conversation with people, and somebody says something that's maybe harsh or judgmental to you. And you cannot let go of it. It just eats at you, and you feel embarrassed, and you feel your face flush, and you feel like everything you say for like the next 10 minutes is to try to get that person or the group to see you in a better light after that painful experience. Well, you're in a small t trauma space. If you could say, "Oh, I lost my adult self. I'm in this really strange and uncomfortable place. This is like some degree of trauma." And you can hold that with an awareness of, yeah, I am not at my most rational now, and I am not at my most adult because my whole life, when I said things that were really truthful, I was shut down. And that's been a trauma for me. And that's what I'm experiencing myself now in that same kind of way. I'm feeling little. I'm feeling angry. I'm feeling resentful. I'm feeling embarrassed. I'm feeling ashamed. There's some trauma going on. If you can say that, and then you can understand what the trauma is and kind of hold yourself with some compassion. And there's an image and a practice for being able to do that that I love, that I'm going to teach everybody in a moment. But if you could do that, something amazing happens. The frozenness begins to melt. You actually feel it. You actually feel like a melting experience of the frozenness and the trauma. And you know that because you start feeling your humanity. You start feeling your heart. You start feeling a sense of compassion or relief. When you're experiencing those things, your system's capacity to process complexity and pain and difficulty kicks in again. The
Mm.
minute you can soften and connect to yourself, you're gold. You're gold because your capacity, your innate capacity to problem solve is beginning to come back. But with trauma, you can't start there. You cannot start with problem solving because it will fail again and again, and you'll feel worse because you'll feel like, what's wrong with me? But if you hold the trauma with an awareness, and you could say, this is trauma. And for those of you who have been through large T trauma and have real PSD, uh, sexual violation, war, abuse, violence, any of those different things, the trauma is much deeper, and you'll experience things that you'll probably be mad at yourself for. Why am I lashing out at the people I love? Why am I pushing away the people I love? Why do I just leave a social situation? Why do I feel like such panic or clammy hands or desperation? You get mad at yourself. Like, what's wrong with me? That's when you stop and you say, oh, this is trauma. I have been through something painful enough that it has shut me down and caused these reverberations of pain. The minute you could say that, it's like a healing, soothing process. It's a first step that really helps. And I want to give you an image of how you can hold yourself at those moments that you're kind of experiencing the reverberations of trauma and you just don't know what to do. And here's what it is. The image is holding yourself with cupped hands. And I'm going to show you an image that I try to get my hands in the right place. Okay, so if you imagine flat, where are my hands? Okay, yeah, really flat hands. You hold it with completely flat hands, like a lack of warmth, a lack of tenderness, just objective, like, oh, what is going on here? What are the symptoms? How am I acting? Well, there's a coldness to that. Or if you imagine squeezing your hands together, just squeezing them, there's a sense of pressure that goes with that, like, stop it, stop it, stop it now, or be different. That doesn't work either. But if you imagine saying, oh, this is trauma, there are reverberations of wounding going inside of me that I need to make space for, that I need to acknowledge and kind of be kind to myself. And you can hold that with cupped hands, which is hands that, it's hard to know how to do this on the camera, but it's hands that are soft and round and cradle the pain, cradle you, but don't squeeze it, and allow room and oxygen and space. So if you could imagine kind of the next time that you experience the reverberations of trauma, being kind enough to say, oh yeah, this is trauma. And then holding the wounding, the fear, the crazy feelings, the frozen feelings, the numb feelings, the terror, the dread, just with cupped hands, knowing that that's the wisest way to hold it. These are things that we can do for ourselves.
Mm.
So those are just some kind of meta, big, broad thoughts that I want to share.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for
Yeah.
sharing the science and then obviously more experiential stuff that you've seen work for yourself. Is there anything else you want to say around like your own personal journey of whatever you've been through and what's worked for you? And you know, we've all had our traumas. Any thoughts there?
Sure. Well, I come from a line of familial trauma, being an Eastern European Jew, the pogroms.
Mm.
My parents are both Holocaust survivors. And so, we have deep familial trauma around that. Um, so there's anxiety, there's trauma around those things. Also, for me, growing up, I'm 64 years old. So I was born in 1956, and I grew up gay in the 50s, not so good, and the early 60s. And so there was a lot of trauma around deep, deep self-hate. Like I remember um, talking to a friend of mine, and I finally got out the words. He was a really lovely, lovely, wonderful person. I was in high school at the time. It was the mid 70s. And I said to him, I just wanted to test this out. I said, so his name was Ken too. I said, so Ken, like, what do you think you would do if you were gay? And he said to me, I don't know if I could live. I would be hated. I would lose my family. I would lose everything. I'd be hated in this world. I don't know if I could bear that. Well, that was a moment of trauma for me because that was my future. So that's just, one. I could name lots of experiences of trauma around that. So those are some examples. And then being a very sensitive person and growing up in a family of survivors who, didn't have a lot of room for that sensitivity because that kind of sensitivity would lead to death in a concentration camp. So these are some examples of trauma for me and ways in which I lost myself and remained lost for decades in these different ways.
Mm.
So for me, and this is a deep and powerful thing, a really rich and incredible thing, I discovered something in my own life and then in my work with clients, which is this: the places I became the most traumatized around were actually the points of my deepest gifts in the world.
Mm.
My sensitivity, which was such a deep gift, I was traumatized there. My being gay, which is, that's my sexuality, my ability to love. So, of course, that's a deep gift. I was traumatized there. Um, my sense of fairness and safety in the world was traumatized by the Holocaust and all of those experiences. And what I discovered, and this is something that is so deep and so profound that I really want to share with everybody, the parts of yourself that were the most wounded in the trauma that you experienced are the most beautiful and precious parts of you. And the thing about abuse is it surgically bonds your most precious parts with terrible, terrible pain, so that you feel your precious parts, but instead you feel humiliation or trauma. Um, this is a profound thing. And so then the question becomes, what's the journey? What's the journey to untangle that bonding? And I think one of the key things is to ask yourself, what is the gift in me that is being triggered by trauma right now? So when I have my small t traumas and I get upset, I get anxious, I get irritated, I get disconnected from myself, I stop and I say, what precious part of me has felt micro violated by the world, micro aggressed by the world, not seen, not understood? When I can find that part and say, oh, yeah, that's the part that just felt hurt by this, and I can hold that part with cupped hands and acknowledge the gift there. That's a point that tapping, by the way, is really helpful. But when I can do that, is name the gift at the heart of the trauma, the entire cycle begins to unravel, because it is self hate that is the glue that keeps us bonded to our trauma.
Mm, That's a profound quote right there, what you just said.
Mm,
Absolutely. Yeah,
mm.
keeps us bound to the trauma. And thank you for sharing your personal experience and all that you've gone through. And hopefully people can see themselves in your own story. And I just so appreciate that. And I remember the last time we talked, just loving this essence of finding those gifts, and it's just such a powerful statement. And yeah, I think that's just awesome, so thank you for sharing that again.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. And I have one practice that I'd love to share with people as
Great.
well. Do we have time for that?
Absolutely, let's do it.
Great, great, great. This is called the inner mentor process. And this is an incredible, because when we are in trauma, you could almost call it like losing yourself. That's like what trauma is. It's like a deep losing of yourself, your integrated self. So this is an exercise to help you find that again. And it's called the inner mentor process. And you can find that, in when as you learn about my work, you'll episode 3 of the Deeper Dating podcast, I teach this in great detail. But so what you do is, and you could do this right now with me as I talk, you just imagine the you that you're meant to be. You just imagine a you that is kind of the essence of you, your ability to love, your ability to give, your ability to care and to understand, your passion for the things that matter. You just picture all those parts of yourself, and then you imagine a you that embodies those more fully, like a you on the other side of all your inner glass ceilings, like kind of you unfolded and evolved. You as full on you. Now just imagine that you don't have to be there. You don't have to earn it. Just imagine it. Imagine what that being's face radiates. Like when you are just at that place that you are brave enough and self loving enough to just be pure you. And now imagine stepping into that you. It's an imagination exercise. Don't worry about earning this. But it's also not just imagination, because you know that you. This is you unfurled. This is you with your wings open. Just imagine that you. And now become that you just for a moment. And look at the you of today and think, from this glorious vantage point, what's the guidance that I want to call out to the me of right now? Think about what that is. Put words on it. If you're alone, you could speak them out loud. You could write them down. And I just want to acknowledge the wisdom that comes to you. So just, let you take a moment. You could pause the recording to do that. And whatever the message was, imagine if you could really love that message and take it in, not do it perfectly, but just love it and take it in. Every time you do that exercise, and I do it every day, at least once, it's quick. Every time you do it, two things are going to happen. One thing that's going to happen is you'll feel a lot better. and you will feel connected to yourself. And if you're in, kind of maybe more of the small T traumas, it will bring you back to your healed self. The other thing that'll happen is whoever that being is you imagined, the more you do it, the closer and the quicker you will get to being that self.
Mm. Yeah, I love that your language of like the already healed self, because I think that
Mm,
that's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. It is like the healed self exists, right? It's there. It's just right, like
yes,
uncovering
yes.
it. So that's beautiful.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it, the healed self. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you for sharing that. I love that you took us through that. Because we are running a little low on time, I want to make sure you have a chance to talk about a great gift you have, a program you have, and everyone watching, there's a couple buttons below that link to Ken's site. So what do you have for us?
Okay. Well, first we have the Deeper Dating podcast, which is over 100 episodes that are really life-changing material on the intimacy journey, just all about the intimacy journey. It's for single people looking for love, but it's for anyone looking to deepen their relationships or learn self-love. So
Mm.
that's one thing we have. For people who are single and looking for relationships, we have Deeper Dating, which is a new generation of ways to meet that are respectful, kind, warm, and inspiring online. That's kind of what the world, what the singles online world needs so desperately.
Yes.
Um, yeah, and there's also my book, Deeper Dating, and my online course, Deeper Dating. The free gift is it's an ebook, and it's the 5 keys to a wiser search for love, and it's 5 insights that are truly life transforming, that help us learn self love, that help us find love, and that help us deepen love. They're the key learnings that I've kind of developed and discovered and learned and thought about in my kind of entire professional and personal journey. So that's an ebook capturing those key insights.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And also I know you have the Deeper Dating Powerful Path to Authentic Love. So what is that?
Oh, yes, yes. So that is something. That's kind of, I have the book Deeper Dating, and then there were years after that where I was practicing teaching this material. And so then since then, I created an audio video course where I'm personally guiding you through every step of the wiser conscious journey to love. So that's something that is kind of like the best and deepest depiction of my teaching available in course form.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And again, everyone, there's links below that take you to all of what we just talked about. Do you have any last insights for everyone before we wrap up?
Yes, I do. I would say that every time you can hold your trauma with tenderness and care, every time you can hold yourself that way, every time you can hold yourself with cupped hands, you have actually evolved significantly. And the effects of that really last. But I'm going to say 2 other things too that I think are important to be said. When you're dealing with trauma, often it's best not to do that alone
Mm.
and to work with a skilled and trained practitioner who has real, solid clinical experience working with trauma. I think that's a really important thing. And then the last thing I want to say is that if you do have any addictions, it's very important to kind of get to a space of sobriety, because without that, none of the healing ends up sticking or lasting. So
Mm.
those are just some thoughts. Trauma is a very powerful thing, and we need to honor it and understand that it's really going to be a journey. And the more support and the more help that you have, the better and the richer and the quicker that journey will be.
Awesome. Thank you, Ken. I really appreciate you mentioning those last two parts. Absolutely,
Mm,
because we want to make sure everyone's taken care of and getting the help that they need. And obviously, the addiction conversation is huge. So making sure you're taking care of yourself and getting the support that you need through the journey. So I appreciate that.
thank you.
Yeah, thank you for doing this again. It was so great to reconnect with you, Ken.
It is my pleasure, and thanks for the beautiful work that you do.
Absolutely, our pleasure. And thank you, everyone, Avaya students who are watching or listening right now. we would not be here without you. Thank you so much for showing up for yourself. It says a lot about you that you're here, you're willing to take in this information, and you're willing to heal and be on that journey. So thank you for doing that for yourself. And we'll see you all again real soon. Take care. Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining us for this latest class with Ken Page. He talked with us about 3 life-changing tools to break free from trauma. I love Ken. I love his soothing, loving nature. I really hope you enjoyed this and enjoyed going through the different modalities that you might begin to explore if you haven't already. We talked about EMDR, we talked about brain spotting, we talked about tapping, and then some of the other exercises that he guided us through today. So one of the big take-home messages for me, and something I want to leave you with, is just recognizing that you do have a healed self within you. When he said something along those lines in that language, it made me realize that I think the more that we believe that we have a self that is healed, that is really like the truest essence of who we are, that is not broken, that is safe and warm and taken care of. I think recognizing that is important and an important key in the journey of healing from trauma. So just thought I'd leave you with that, because I thought it was really profound when he talked about that recognizing that you already have a healed self, and really it's about connecting with that self. So if you enjoyed this class, I highly recommend you also check out Ken's class for Avaya's Overcoming Emotional Abuse and Deception Masterclass. He dives in deep to that conversation in a really loving way as well. So if you have not checked out his class there, you can do that at the homepage of avaya.com. Thank you everyone for joining us for this event and taking on this journey. We'll see you again soon. Take care.
Avaya has changed my life.
Avaya has made me the woman I am today.
Avaya is my home.
Avaya is personal freedom.
Avaya is the reason my life continuously improves.
Let everyone in your life know about Avaya.
Everyone needs to know about this amazing company.
Thank you, Avaya, for appearing in my inbox.
What Ike Allen and Andy Anderson have created at Avaya is what the world needs.